Good morning, church. Good to see all of you this morning. It was great to see so many people in person last Sunday at picnic. And I just want to give a big thank you to the organizers. Thank you, Peter, for really being top of it and pushing it. Ajay for organizing everything, the food, the games. The food was excellent. And of course, Ajit and Sushmita for being overall and in charge of the bus and making sure that we all reach there and come back safely. Also, thank all of you who came over there, especially the Simpsons, Suchitra and their family who traveled all the way from Ranagarh just to be with us. Thank you very much. So last time we finished Matthew chapter 13. Today we will actually go back to Genesis and start from where we left off. I like to go back to old and the new so that we are not just focusing on one, we are learning from both. Last time, if you remember, we were in Genesis chapter 30 verse 1 to 24 and we learned about envy. And we learned about envy between two sisters, Leah and Rachel. We also saw that envy starts when we start comparing with each other or with others and we are not content. Envy brings disaster in our lives if we don't see it. And worst of all is it robs us of our joy. Envy takes away our joy. So big question that this morning we got to ask ourselves as we learn from these situation is, do I struggle with envy in my heart? Is there envy in my heart right now? Because if you are envious, you can't be joyful. Let's continue from Genesis chapter 30 verse 25 onwards till the end of the chapter this morning. And today the title is called God Works in Spite of Me. So 25 to 26, let's read there. So in total, Jacob lived with Laban in Padam Aram for 20 years. 14 years he worked for Laban, keeping his agreement in exchange for Laban's 2 daughters. Keeping agreements, even if it was just a verbal agreement, was a big thing in those days. A lot of importance was given to a man's word. Sadly today, a man's word has no value, and that's the reason we have so much of paperwork whenever there is an agreement of any sort. And a side point we can learn from Jacob's attitude was that he was a man of his word when it came to an agreement with his father-in-law. And it's a good question for us to ask ourselves is, am I a man or a woman of my word? Do I give my word lightly or am I serious of keeping my word no matter what happens? When we got baptized, when we became a disciple of Jesus, we also gave a word that Jesus is my Lord. Is He still the Lord of my life today? Is He still the Lord of all my relationships? Is Jesus still the Lord of my time, my gifts, my talents? Is Jesus still the Lord of my finances? And if you're married, you made a promise also on the day of your marriage, till death do us part. Do you love your spouse and are you faithful to your spouse? Jacob kept his verbal agreement. And another 6 years passed before he finally left the place of Laban. And during this time, Jacob was blessed with 11 sons and 1 daughter. Now that's a big family. And so there was no way that Laban and his family and Jacob and his family with all their livestock could live in one place. That place was too small for both the families. Let's look at Laban's response in verse 27 and 28. Now Laban was giving him actually a blank check in verse 28. What does he say? Name your wages and I will pay them. Now your divination does not mean what he was trying to do some black magic to figure out. It basically, another word for the same word is basically experience. And what Laban was saying is, from experience I know that God has blessed me because of you. He did not need divination to figure out the obvious blessing that was right in front of him. Let's really look at Jacob's response in verse 29 and 30, and let me read this in English. It said, Jacob said to him, that is Laban, you know how I worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. And in a way now, Jacob is trying to, put his father-in-law down or make a point in verse 30. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household? So Jacob over here makes it very clear to Laban that, hey Laban, when I came you had nothing, and now all that you have is because of course God and me. And in verse 27 that we read before that, Laban also acknowledges that it is because of God and because of Jacob that he has been blessed so much. Something that we got to ask ourselves is my life a blessing to others? Because that's why God created. He created our life. He designed us so that we can be a blessing to others. God never created us to live a selfish, lonely, private life. We see that in Matthew chapter 28, verse 18 to 20, when Jesus says to go and make disciples of all nations. What is he saying? That, hey, go out and be a blessing to the world. Like Jacob, let's make sure that our life is a blessing to people around us. At the same time, also think about all the people in your life that has been a blessing to you. Thank them, pray for them, appreciate what they have done for you, even though it might be something very little. So in verse 31, Laban is asking, what shall I give you? So let's look at Jacob's response, 34. Amen. So when Laban is asking him, what shall I give you? Jacob is saying that every speckled, spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, every spotted or speckled goat, that will be my wages. That means he's saying that all the animals that have spots or stripes or colored, they will be mine and rest will be yours. Now I'm not very sure with what confidence Jacob came out with this plan. Because the way the animals are going to be born was not in his hands. And I don't know, was he very smart or was he very foolish? And we see that in spite of sometimes we make foolish decisions, God still works. And that is what we see in Jacob's life a little later. But in verse 34, Laban agrees immediately. Why? Why was he so eager to accept the condition? Let's find out. Verse 35 and 36. So now, if you remember what Jacob had initially said that, let me go through all your flocks today and remove every speckled, spotted sheep, dark-colored lamb and speckled goat. But what we see over here is as soon as Jacob goes off, Laban does that shifting. He actually removes all the speckled sheep, goat, lamb and gives it to his son to take care and sends them away towards a 3 days gap. So basically, after working for 20 years, Jacob was given nothing by Laban. Laban had no intention to give Jacob anything. In fact, Laban did not even want Jacob to go, because Laban knew that Jacob was that goose that was laying golden eggs for him. And why would he let such a person go? A side point we can learn from this point as well is, we need to be like Jacob. When it comes to our work, when it comes to our boss, they should find it very hard to let us go. Our landlord should find it very hard to let us go. Our fellowship should find it very hard when someone moves. I know we have Lika and Alan has moved, and for some reason we find it very hard because we miss them so much, because they played such an important role in the church. In our house there is a dullness that has come because of that. Also I was talking to Emmanuel the other day, Emmanuel Barua. And he was telling me about that, he had to move, wanted to move his house because the rent was going to increase and he couldn't pay the increase of the rent. So he told his landlord, by the way, the landlord works for Delhi police. And when he told his landlord that, he is planning to move, the landlord came running to find out what was the problem why Emmanuel and Toli and the family were moving. Do you have any problem? Is someone giving you a problem in this place? And Emmanuel said, no, I have no problems. It is just that, I can't afford to pay the increase of the rent. And so the landlord, he didn't want them to go, and so instead of increasing the rent, he reduced the rent by 3,000 rupees. That's the kind of impact we need to have wherever we go, that people wouldn't want us to leave. Now coming back to Jacob and Laban, Jacob was cheated again by his uncle. First, when it came to getting married, he was given Leah instead of Rachel. And instead of working for 7 years, he had to end up working for 14 years. And now, when it comes to his wages, everything was taken away. And what we see over here is what goes around comes back to us. Because remember, Jacob deceived his brother, he deceived his father, and now someone bigger than him is deceiving him, not once, but twice. And now God is teaching Jacob the same lesson, that you deceived others, you will be deceived. And for what he did to his brother and his father, he had to face that for 20 years. By the way, Esau had no idea what is happening with his brother for 20 years. And so that's what happens. Sometimes we don't realize the people who take advantage of it, the people who deceive us, the people who have taken advantage. We don't know what is happening, but God works in their life. And so we got to find security in God, that even though someone might take advantage of us, God will deal with that person. Maybe 20 years later. Because God is a righteous judge. God said, revenge is mine. Let me deal with it. You continue to do what is right. And that's what we see in Jacob. When you get cheated, when you are taken advantage of, when someone takes away what is rightly yours, how do you feel? I know my sinful nature is to take it by force. My sinful nature is, hey, this is mine. What rightly belongs to me is mine. I will take it by force. That's my sinful nature. Look in verse 36. It says, let's look at Jacob's response. In verse 36 it says, Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flock. A wrong was done to him. But instead of him taking matters in his own hands, he trusted God for his future. He trusted that God will allow the speckled and spotted flocks to be produced in spite of Laban's deceitfulness. Instead of taking revenge, instead of wanting to take matters in his own hand, the Bible says he continued to take care of Laban's flocks. That's what trusting in God does. Trusting in God motivates us to do what is right, even when someone else is taking advantage of you. And when we take matters in our own hands, whether it's revenge or retaliation, it just shows that we are not trusting in God. So I would just want to encourage you, trust God and do what is right, and God will come through. Let's read further what happens as we conclude over here. 37 to 42. Now this is a very confusing passage. There is no reason why Jacob's strategy should work over here. He was acting upon a belief in his days that whatever a mother sees during her conceiving will affect her offspring. For example, if she sees stripes during her conceiving, then she will bear striped offspring. And if she sees spots, then she will bear spots offspring. It's a crazy concept. There is no reason why this should work. Because if it was working, then we would all, we would make sure that when our children are conceived, we would be watching Bill Gates and, Thomas Edison, so that our kids will be rich and intelligent. But whatever Jacob did, it worked. Or we can say, God worked in spite of Jacob. And see, that's something that we got to understand, is God is working behind the scenes. In this passage, if you notice, there are three characters. We saw Jacob, we saw Laban, but we do not see the big character that is playing, and God is behind everything. Laban wanted to take advantage of his son-in-law Jacob. God had other plans and blessed Jacob in spite of Laban's deceit. And in verse 43 as we end, it says, in this way the man, that is Jacob, grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and females and male servants and camels and donkeys. It's amazing. Jacob went there with nothing and walks out with everything, and there wasn't a single thing that Laban could do about it. In particular, if you notice, it says he was in the possession of camels. That shows that Jacob was exceptionally rich, because camels were costly and rare. So we see this morning that in spite of everything, in spite of Jacob's weaknesses, God was still with him and blessed him. So what did we learn from today's passage? That God works in spite of any obstacles we face, in spite of our own foolishness and weakness. And God blessed Laban because of Jacob. Let our life be a blessing to others. And the best blessing we can give others is to help people to know God, to help people to know Christ. The second thing we learned is God blessed Jacob in spite of Laban's evil scheme. Let us continue to do what is right in spite of others having evil plans against us. And lastly, third and lastly, we see over here that God worked in spite of a foolish plan. Even though whatever plan Jacob had did not make sense, in spite of all that, God still worked in his life and blessed him. Conclusion, God works in spite of me. I hope we learned something today. I pray that we can learn from the example of Jacob and see that when we are righteous, God will fight our battles for us and bless us. Remember, God is working behind the scenes. You might not realize it, but He is there. Thank you very much. God bless you. Let's have a great week, and we meet again next Sunday.